Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's virtual summit presentation, New Editions of College Algebra and Precalculus. My name is Danny Shapiro, and I'm on the marketing team here at Hawks Learning. Our speaker today is Dr. Paul Sisson. Dr. Sisson is a professor of mathematics emeritus and provost emeritus and vice chancellor for academic affairs at Louisiana State University, Shreveport. In addition to continuing to teach undergraduate and graduate mathematics throughout his career, he served in numerous administrative capacities, including department chair, college dean, graduate studies dean, provost and vice chancellor for academic affairs, and interim chancellor. Dr. Sisson's research articles in the area of infinite dimensional topological vector spaces have appeared in Studia Mathematica and the Proceedings of the American Mathematical Society. His interests also include such diverse areas as math pedagogy and mathematical art, with articles appearing in Mathematics Magazine, College Mathematics Journal, and the Journal of Mathematics and Art. Dr. Sisson published his first math textbook with Hawks, College Algebra, in 2003, by Precalculus in 2000, College Algebra, A Concise Approach in 2011. Most recently, he is the co-author of Calculus with Early Transcendentals in 2016. Dr. Sisson's teaching experience is reflected in his textbook writing, with emphasis in the historical and human aspects of math, calls upon the intuition of the reader, and uses modern technology to enable students to explore mathematics and develop mathematical confidence. Dr. Sisson, we are very excited to have you here with us today to talk about the new editions of College Algebra and Precalculus. Audience, if you do have questions during the webinar, please enter those into the Q&A box located on the panel at the bottom of your screen, and we will address them at the end of the talk. On that note, I'd love to hand it over to our presenter.
All right, thank you, Danny. That was a great and very comprehensive introduction. It actually covered some of the things I'll talk about today in this presentation. And thank you everyone for joining me today in this sneak preview of the brand new third editions of my first two books. And this really is a sneak preview. These books don't actually exist yet, but we are nearing the end of a very long process, and so they will be coming out soon. In fact, here are mock-ups of what the covers are going to look like. As you heard, I'm a real fan of mathematical art, and occasionally get to create some mathematical art myself. These pieces are not mine, though. These are photos of mathematical sculptures by George Hart, who's a well-known mathematician and mathematical artist. If you've gone to any of the big math conferences over the past decade or so, you've probably run into George Hart, or you've seen his work, especially if the conference has a mathematical arts area in the display area. I love these pieces. And I have given talks on mathematical art in the past. This is not a talk on mathematical art. But I promise if you stick it out to the end, there will be some more mathematical art at the end. Well, when I give a talk, I like to give everyone a roadmap up front so people know what we're doing and what to expect. I don't think I could talk for the better part of an hour just on what is new in the third editions of the two books. If I did, you'd be looking around for your coffee, and it's not a face-to-face conference, so I can't actually provide coffee. Get it yourself if you'd like, but unfortunately it's on you. So instead of just talking about the gory details of what is new in these books, I'm going to be a bit more expansive and talk about what led me to write in the first place, my philosophy of teaching and writing. So that really starts with my background, some of which you've already heard. And then that will lead into motivations, both good and bad motivations. And then we'll get into the details of what is new in these third editions. So first, some more about my background. Well, I am a mathematician. I started off many years ago as a assistant professor of math at LSU Shreveport and rose through the ranks to full professor. But along the way, I had many other experiences, all of which have given me a much broader and hopefully better view of the modern educational environment, especially as it pertains to mathematics. So I did serve as chair of the math department for many years. I was also interim chair of the computer science department for 4 years. It was a long interim appointment. And then I was dean of the College of Science, dean of graduate studies, provost and vice chancellor for academic affairs for seemed like an eternity to ongoing budget cuts. It was actually, I think, only about 6 years. And then I finished up as interim chancellor for a bit more than 2 years. And then I retired from university life. So now I have moved. I live in a beautiful location in the middle of New Mexico. And I'm a full-time author, and I get to indulge in some other activities that I've studied during my work career. I also serve as a volunteer tutor in the small town about half an hour from where I live. So I guess I should add one more bullet point. I am acting as a tutor. Right now I'm tutoring the mayor of that small town as he tries to finish up his business degree, and he's taking business calculus right now. You're going to see a number of some of my favorite math quotes as we go through this presentation, and this seems like a great one to start off with. Well, as I taught and as I served in administrative roles, without really thinking about it, I kind of developed a fantasy of what education would look like in the ideal world. And needless to say, this doesn't actually exist, but this is what I would love to see education be like. It would consist of a teacher who has the luxury of being just completely focused on sharing knowledge, and who has the luxury of using whatever carefully curated teaching materials he or she desires. And there would be a well-prepared student who's enthusiastic about learning, and nothing else. And of course, in reality, that is far from what education is really like. And I'm going to list the characteristics of what I see as the real world education environment, not because I have solutions for the problems listed here or ways to address these characteristics, but really just to indicate that this is what's on my mind as I teach and as I write. So of course, those of us that are teachers or were teachers, we know that teachers are always torn between many activities: teaching, service, and scholarship, just to name 3 big ones. Students, unfortunately, are often underprepared, and not as prepared as we would like, at least, and they are increasingly stressed, increasingly having to juggle school, jobs, family, transportation, health issues, as so many people are right now. When I started taking on administrative roles, I came to understand, I'm not going to say appreciate, but understand that helicopter parents are a phenomenon that does not end with high school, that continues on in the college setting. Teachers are unfortunately faced with administrative expectations, which may or may not be aligned with educational goals. Sometimes teachers are also faced with political demands, which in my experience are almost never aligned with educational goals. And there are many other distractions as well. And again, all of these factors play a role in what I put into my books. At least they color how I am presenting material in some way or another. And unfortunately, there's the biggest problem of all, which we all know very well. Math has an unfortunate reputation. And one reason for that is that math is still, I think, far too often presented as a list of sterile formulas that are disconnected from one another. There's a lack of context and motivation, and often these formulas just appear as if they were handed down by the math gods. And this certainly plays a role in that unfortunate reputation that math has. It also colors how policymakers think about math and whether math is still as necessary as maybe it once was thought of. And this unfortunate reputation is something that I think I can directly address in my books. And so this may be the most important factor of all. A few more math quotes. These always remind me of my view of math as I left high school and began college. When I graduated from high school, I had, as so many people, especially in this country, I had an entirely incorrect impression of what mathematics was. I went off to college with no intention to be a math major. I'm not even entirely sure I knew that it was possible to be a math major. And thankfully, I had my mind and my attitude changed very quickly in college. I got to experience the joy of math. I had some great math professors, and my view was just completely switched around. But unfortunately, especially in K through 12, math is not presented in a enjoyable way. A few more slides here on background factors. So student characteristics. Again, these are things that are on my mind as I write, definitely. And during my teaching career, I've certainly seen that students have ever wider levels of preparation coming into a class. There will be students who are taking a class having just left the previous class, but often on the other end of the spectrum, there will be students who have not had a math class for a couple of decades. Students have ever broader objectives and expectations from the class. They have had the experience of learning in many different environments and in many different ways. And students, I think, are expecting more and more active participation and expecting much faster feedback. And these are, I don't mean to imply at all that these are negative characteristics. Some I think are very positive. I am very fond of the last one, for instance, because we have the tools now to address the need for active participation and instant feedback. The tools that we have as educators are certainly very diverse now. So there is the traditional textbook, which I'm principally concerned with creating, but I include both the print and electronic form of traditional textbooks. Internet references and videos, which used to, of course, not exist at all, and now they're too numerous to mention. Intelligent tutoring software, and the Hawk software is a preeminent example of really intelligent and useful tutoring software. Technology, graphing calculators, Mathematica, websites that are focused on helping students visualize mathematics. And we have the benefit of being able to look at a great deal of research on effective learning strategies. We know of many different ways to educate now. So spending a bit more time on that topic, of course, there's the traditional lecture format, which always has a place. Online classrooms, which so many people right now are rapidly moving to if they haven't already been teaching online. Small group work, which is very popular and very effective. as I said, active learning and the opportunity for exploration, which is much more prevalent now. And one of my favorites, having students teach students. This is a technique that I used over and over again when I was actively teaching on a university campus. And as many people have said, the major benefit here is not necessarily for the student receiving the teaching, but rather the student who is preparing to teach another student. That's the student who really derives the greatest benefit. One more quote just to remind ourselves of the dismal view that the general population has of mathematics. Let's move on to good and bad motivations. And this slide is probably the one that is most focused on why I teach and the style that I use, the material that I choose to put in my books, the way I present material. So for whatever reason, and this is all something that developed over my teaching career, I just think it's so important to not present math as a sterile list of formulas, but instead to constantly drive home the point that it is a human endeavor. Math is created by people. There's history and context behind all the math that we create. Mathematicians certainly are dependent on intuition, and it's important for students when they're learning to use intuition as well. I love to inspire my students to explore and provide the opportunities for that. I try to provide the same opportunities in my books as with providing ample and diverse exercises. Really try to emphasize that it's important to understand the concepts as opposed to simply memorizing formulas. I love technology. I'm a heavy user of technology myself. And I like to see it seamlessly integrated as opposed to just being an add-on feature. Rigor and precision are two of the beautiful things about mathematics. So I try to stress that and maintain rigor and precision, not, of course, at the expense of the creative aspects of mathematics, which are, if anything, even more important. And finally, and this is really key to my writing, I think it's important to write books that are actually read. And when I get feedback from professors and students who are using my books, the best feedback, the feedback that makes me feel best about what I've done, is when they say something along the lines of, wow, for the first time in my life, I found myself actually reading the math book. That's the whole intent. I'm not the only mathematician who has expressed the fact that math is a creative field. So here are a couple better known mathematicians and their quotes on the topic. And I like this one-page cartoon, especially for the third panel here. This is a one-page summary of a article by someone else. The cartoon is by Mark Bennett, but the article that this is summarizing is a mathematician's lament by Paul Lockhart. If you haven't read this article, I encourage you to do so. You can find it online. It's a really nice article. Lockhart is very passionate in his views. You may or may not agree with all of his opinions, but I think you can appreciate his passion. And that third panel on this page certainly expresses my thought about what mathematicians do. Here's a quote from that Lockhart article. So on the flip side, here are some of the bad practices, things I've seen in either books or going back in time, maybe things I've seen in the classroom that did not work for me, that I don't think are good. And so these things inspire me in a negative way. So when math is presented without history or the human aspect, without context or without goals, I don't think that works. When formulas are simply handed out without motivation or development or the need for thought, but cookie cutter procedures that may or may not actually apply to a given situation. And this one applies to math writing in particular. I don't mind sidebar comments all, but I do mind when sidebar comments are not related to the body of the text and when they're simply distracting. Again, I like to write books that are meant to be read in a linear fashion as math is best learned. And so I try to keep everything focused, and on any given page, everything is of a piece, hopefully without distractions. Okay, so let me move into the actual details. And I think I'm at the stage where the relevance of this quote doesn't need any further explanation. So I'll start with just a brief description of the revision process. And here I want to especially thank my editorial team at Hawks. The process of turning out a new edition of a book really begins as soon as the previous edition is published. But in this case, we are nearing the end, or by the time these books appear, we will have put about 2 years of constant work into these new editions. I've enjoyed it. It's been a whole lot of work for me, but it's been a whole lot of work for my team at Hawks as well. And I just want to congratulate them for all their hard work. For them, it really begins with them collecting comments and suggestions by teachers and students. Again, as soon as the previous editions are put out, if there are any typos to correct, then of course those are collected and organized. But more importantly, are suggestions for either new material or ways of presenting material, and so all that winds up being compiled. I have a giant spreadsheet that was begun by the people at Hawks, and then I added on to that just lists all of these changes in both books. As I said, it's about 2 years of work by the time we actually turn these books out. Facts and figures are painstakingly checked as time goes on, and some data used in examples might actually change. Figures might need to be updated. So all of that is done. And literally every page is looked at. Usually, almost always, there's a way to improve the graphic or improve the layout, or of course, in many cases, there's brand new material. So more of the details. There is a brand new chapter in both books. And here, Call 3 and PRC 3, that stands for the 3rd edition of College Algebra and the 3rd edition of Precalculus. So both books have a new chapter called Working with Functions. And the 3rd edition of Precalculus has a new chapter on limits, continuity, and the derivative. There are new sections. Both books have an entirely new section on mathematical models. Of course, there's been plenty of discussion in the past in previous editions on mathematical models, but there hasn't been a section specifically devoted to talking about mathematical models. And that was certainly a request by a number of users, and I thought that was important as well. So now there is just a dedicated section. I'm really happy with the realism of the examples and exercises throughout the books, but especially in this new section. There are business applications, and just to pick an example, very careful explanation for why it might be reasonable to expect that the graph of revenue as a function of items sold might be a downward opening curve, and so why you might be able to find a relative maximum to the revenue function. Regression is motivated and developed. In the Precalculus book, there's also a new section on hyperbolic functions, and I wanted to put that in there so that students would not be faced in calculus with the implicit expectation that they already know about hyperbolic functions, when often when a student gets to calculus, they have never seen hyperbolic functions before. So now there is a section that is all on the history, development, and use of hyperbolic functions. There are going to be many topics on this page. This is the busiest slide in the presentation. And this is not a complete list, but these are some of the new or expanded topics in both books. So linear regression, very careful motivation, development of linear regression with Pearson correlation coefficients developed at the same time. Quadratic regression, and when the use of quadratic regression is justified or not. Better discussion of intervals of monotonicity, better discussion of properties of functions. Interpolation and extrapolation is new to one of the books, and very happy with the way that material turned out. Better presentation of how to stretch graphs horizontally. Better presentation of local extrema, average rate of change, exponential regression, logistic models, logarithmic regression, expanded coverage of elementary logarithmic equations, systems of linear inequalities, nonlinear inequalities. Transition matrices are brand new to one of the books, and the multinomial theorem is new to one of the books. And as you might guess, this is where a lot of the thousands of hours spent on these new editions being put. So a lot of time in either thinking of ways to better cover this material, or in some cases, cover material that had been omitted in the past. This was a request by many users of the Precalculus book. The development of trig functions as a function of a real variable, of course, had been covered before, but not in a way that really made use of the unit circle. So much better methodology in terms of developing trig functions and using the unit circle. In both books, the one function that introduced, or sorry, one chapter that introduced functions has been split into two chapters now. The first one introducing relations, functions, and graphs, and then the second one working with functions. Third edition of College Algebra has split the section on polynomials into two sections, just to provide more space, more time for exploring these topics. Both books have separate sections now on linear functions and quadratic functions, and both books have separate sections on transformations of functions and properties of functions. And a great deal of time spent on expanding and coming up with a new organization for the exercises in both books. So here are the ways of classifying the exercises. I think this has worked out very well. Well, I will be happy to take questions if there are any questions. And I promised you some more mathematical art at the end of the talk, so I'm going to leave you with a bit of that. The first 3 slides here are some of my mathematical art. And I actually can discuss these in both books. And then the last 2 slides here, this is someone else's mathematical art, and this leads to the cover of the calculus book. But that's the subject for another presentation. But now I'll be happy to take any questions if there are questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Sisson. Remind our audience, again, you can put questions in that question in answer box. We'll take a minute here and wait for any questions to come through. If you do have a question later on that you think of after reflecting on the presentation, you can always email those to us at marketing@hawkslearning.com, and we'll get them over to Dr. Sisson, work to get back to you with an answer for that. Dr. Sisson, it was cutting out for me just a little bit, and it may be my phone connection. But could you talk again, just for a minute more, about the expanded exercise sets of the practice applications, technology, and writing and thinking?
Sure. Let me go back to that slide just so we can look at it. So in the previous editions, only a few sections actually had some organization like this. But now this is the standard for both books to characterize, classify the exercises in these 4 categories. And so there are, and again, as we expanded the exercise set, there are many problems that are focused on practice, others that are focused on applications, those that really call for the use of technology of some kind. Those are highlighted. And then there are some brand new writing and thinking exercises, and many of those are brand new.
And I love how these all incorporate the types of things that you want to work into a book. And I feel like they really reflect your approach to writing. And it's neat that we can incorporate them throughout both of the books now.
Yeah, that was a very natural sort of thing to do. Not really sure why that did not happen in the first 2 editions, because again, it is a very natural thing to do, just to really emphasize history and the need for intuition, the advantage of being able to explore a topic, and then of course the development is really just the fact that you need to practice over and over and over again.
Okay, well, thank you so much to our audience for coming today. Dr. Sisson, thank you again. We really enjoyed having you here, and we are so looking forward to the new editions of these books and getting them out and into the hands of students and instructors everywhere. So thank you again. We'll be emailing out a link to this recorded session, and we have, if you are interested, if you want more information about any part of this, we have lots of resources and further information on all different aspects of these new editions, and we can work to get you that and get you samples into your hands so you can start diving in and digging deeper into these books. Hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
All right, thank you, Danny.